The phone rang at 2:47 a.m., Denver time. I remember because I checked my watch twice, thinking maybe I'd misread it. The hotel room was dark except for the glow of the city below, 50 stories up, looking down at nothing that mattered anymore. Mom's voice came through thin and cracked. "It's Dad. He's had a stroke. They don't know if he'll make it. You need to come home. Now." I didn't ask questions. I didn't check the time difference or wonder why she was calling instead of my brother. I just moved. Booked the first flight. Packed in the dark. Left my laptop open on the desk with the Portland merger files still glowing on screen. Files I'd spent 3 weeks negotiating. Files that were supposed to close in 6 hours. The airport at 4 a.m. is a strange place. Gray light, nobody talking, everybody moving like ghosts toward their own disasters. I didn't know yet that this call was the beginning of the end. I didn't know that my mother had lied. I didn't know that by the time I landed in Seattle, everything I'd built over 15 years would already be gone. Before that phone call, my life was small and perfect in the way that matters. I'm Sarah Chen, 34 years old. I built a commercial real estate firm from nothing. Started with a laptop, a business license I paid $200 for, and enough stubborn belief in myself to make most people uncomfortable. My father, my grandfather technically, but we all just called him Dad, had taught me that money isn't about luck. It's about knowing what people want before they know they want it. Grandpa bought his first warehouse in 1982 for $80,000. He sold it 8 years later for $1.2 million. Then he did it again. And again. By the time I turned 22, he was a legend in Seattle real estate circles. Not famous. Legendary. People whispered his name like he'd figured out something fundamental about how the world actually works. When I was 8, he took me to one of his properties, a falling-apart strip mall in South Seattle. The roof was leaking. The tenants were ghosts. Graffiti covered the back wall. "What do you see?" he asked me. I saw a disaster. "I see 40 people who need affordable retail space," he said. "I see a neighborhood that's about to boom. I see the future." He was right. 5 years later, that strip mall was worth $6 million. That's what he taught me, how to see the future in broken things, how to be patient, how to wait for the exact right moment to strike. By 2019, I'd built Chen Properties into something respectable. I had 17 employees, 43 active contracts, office space in Portland, Seattle, and Tacoma. My last quarter revenue was $3.4 million. I was buying a house, 3 bedrooms, corner lot in Fremont, exactly the kind of place Grandpa would have analyzed for structural integrity and resale potential. I was happy in a way that surprised me. I had a team I trusted. I had client relationships that went back years. I had insurance, retirement accounts, and a business partner named Michael who'd been with me since the beginning. We started in a shared office space on Pike Street. We'd driven hundreds of miles together looking at properties. He knew my dreams because I'd told them to him at 2 a.m. during stakeouts, waiting for properties to be officially foreclosed so we could be first in line to make an offer. Michael was more than my business partner. He was like my brother. That's what makes this part of the story so hard to tell. My mom, though, my mom was always different. She married my dad when she was 23. She never worked. She went to lunch with her friends and complained about her husband's hours and raised my brother, David, while I was mostly raised by Grandpa and the babysitter. Not in a mean way, just the truth of how it was. My mom was beautiful in the way that required maintenance. Yoga classes and facials and complicated hair appointments. She loved clothes more than people. She loved being seen at the right restaurants. She loved expensive wine and feeling like she was part of something exclusive. She loved money. I'd never said that out loud before, but it was true. She didn't love Grandpa. She loved what he represented. Security, status, the kind of life where you never had to check the price of anything. My dad was a cardiologist. They had a beautiful house in Medina. They went to Hawaii twice a year. My mom should have been happy. But happiness and security aren't the same thing, and my mom had never understood the difference. I got home at noon on a Tuesday. The house was exactly as I remembered it: massive, modern, all white marble and floor-to-ceiling windows. Grandpa was in the living room sitting in his favorite chair. He looked small, which shocked me. I'd never thought of him as small. He was sleeping. My mom was in the kitchen drinking coffee with her friend Patricia. They stopped talking when I came in. Patricia excused herself immediately. My mom stood up and hugged me, and I realized she wasn't crying. "How is he?" I asked. "The doctors are confused," she said. "The scans show some damage, but they're not sure if he's going to recover the ability to speak clearly. He's stable, though. The worst has passed." I went to sit with him. Grandpa opened his eyes and recognized me. He raised his right hand, the left side of his body clearly affected, and I held it. His grip was still strong. "Tell me," he said, his words slurred but clear enough. "I'll stay here," I said, "as long as you need me." He nodded, closed his eyes again. The first 3 days were normal. Doctors visited. My brother David came home from Lowe's Angels with his wife. We all sat around trying to seem like a family while mostly checking our phones. Mom was attentive but formal. She made sure Grandpa's room was comfortable. She tracked his medications. She called the nurse's station if anything seemed wrong. It was good caretaking, but it was performed caretaking, like she was playing a role. On the 4th day, my brother pulled me aside in the hallway. "Did Mom talk to you about Grandpa's will?" he asked. "No, why would she?" "Because he's apparently changing it. He's talking to lawyers today, and he mentioned something about the company." The company, Chen Properties. The one thing Grandpa built that mattered more than houses. He'd started it 30 years ago. He'd been the CEO until his retirement 5 years before. I'd bought a partial stake in the company when I turned 30, a major investment that Grandpa approved, watching me the way he watched everything, calculating whether I was worth believing in. I was supposed to inherit his share when he died. That was the understanding. Someday, I'd own it completely. "What did he say about the company?" I asked David. "I don't know, just that things were changing. I thought maybe he'd told you." That night, I called the lawyer who'd handled Grandpa's estate planning. His name was Mr. Harrison. He'd been very clear on the phone before I left Portland that he couldn't discuss details of any client's legal arrangements without authorization. But I had a feeling about this. The next morning, while my mom was out at her yoga class, I asked Grandpa about it directly. "What are you changing in your will?" I asked. He looked at me for a long moment. His speech had improved. The doctors said his brain was already rerouting around the damaged areas. He was going to be fine. "Not yet," he said. "Your mother, she wants control." "Control of what?" "Everything. She has a man, a financial advisor. She says I need to move my assets, tax purposes." My chest felt tight. "What did you tell her?" "I'm thinking." Grandpa never thought about things. He decided immediately and lived with the consequences. The fact that he was thinking about this meant he was actually considering it. "Don't," I said. He smiled. It was sad. "Maybe it's time," he said. "I'm old, Sarah. Maybe I should just let someone else handle it." "That's not who you are." "No," he agreed, "but I'm tired." I went back to Portland that night. I told everyone Grandpa was stable and I needed to manage the business. Nobody questioned it. My brother probably wanted me gone. My mom definitely did. The Portland office was chaos. Michael had been holding down the fort, but we had 3 deals in motion and one major problem. The mayor's office had denied our permit for the Belltown development, a project I'd been working on for 2 years. A 60-unit mixed-income housing complex that was supposed to break ground in 8 weeks. "They won't say why," Michael told me, sliding a folder across my desk. "The chief planner just rejected it, no explanation, sent the decision via email on Friday." I'd never seen that before. Permits had reasons. Environmental issues, structural concerns, zoning violations. They didn't just disappear. I called the mayor's office directly. The deputy director put me on hold for 11 minutes, then said the decision was final. "I'd like to understand the reasoning," I said. "The reasoning is in the decision letter." "There is no reasoning in the decision letter. It's blank." A pause. "That's correct, Ms. Chen." I hung up. Something was wrong. The second thing happened 3 days later. I got a call from the bank. Our operating credit line had been canceled. Immediately. No notice, no explanation, just gone. "Why?" I asked the loan officer. "You'll need to speak with the account manager about that." "I'm speaking to someone. I'm speaking to you." "I'm not authorized to discuss the details." 4 hours of phone calls got me nowhere. The credit line had been terminated due to portfolio adjustment, which meant nothing, which meant everything. I had payroll to make in 2 weeks. I had supplier contracts I'd committed to. I had a business that couldn't breathe without that line of credit. That night, I was in my Fremont house, sitting on the kitchen floor when Michael called. "We have a bigger problem," he said. "Bigger than what?" "Bigger than the credit line. The Belltown development investor just pulled out. He said something spooked him about the project. He's requesting his deposit back." "What deposit? We haven't collected anything yet." "That's the thing. He's claiming we told him it would be $400,000 to hold the property while permits were processed. And he wants it back because the project looks unstable." I'd never made that agreement. I'd never even met this investor. "Send me his contact information," I said. "I already tried calling him. He won't return my calls." I hung up and called our business attorney. His name was Robert Finch. He'd worked with Grandpa for 20 years. "I think something very bad is happening," I told him. "Tell me," he said. I laid it out. The permit denial, the credit line cancellation, the investor pulling out. The fact that none of it made sense in the normal trajectory of failure. It felt orchestrated. "Sarah," Robert said carefully, "I need to ask you something. Has anything happened with your family? Anything unusual?" "What do you mean?" "I mean that I got a call from a lawyer named Patricia Solverson yesterday. She's representing your mother on a matter involving your grandfather's estate. She asked about the structure of Chen Properties, about voting shares, about who had control." My stomach went cold. Why would my mother be asking about that? That's what concerned me. So I'm calling you, because I think someone is trying to destabilize your business, and I think your mother might be involved. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I started researching Patricia Solverson. She worked for a firm called Drake and Associates, specializing in asset protection and wealth transfer. But that's not what mattered. What mattered was that she'd represented my mother in a previous business dispute, a lawsuit against the city over a restaurant my parents had invested in. And she'd won. Aggressively. The kind of lawyer who didn't believe in losing. I pulled up my grandfather's will. It was public record. He'd died in 2008 before I was born. Wait. No, he hadn't died. He was alive. I was thinking about this wrong. I pulled up my grandfather's current legal documents. They were sealed, protected, but I could see from the filing dates that he'd been meeting with lawyers, multiple lawyers, recent meetings. And my mother had listed her occupation as business advisor on a legal petition filed 2 weeks ago. 2 weeks ago, while I was in Portland negotiating the merger. While Grandpa was alive and healthy, showing no signs of stroke, eating dinner with us normally. 2 weeks before she called me at 2:47 a.m. and said he'd had a stroke. I opened my laptop and started documenting everything. The credit line cancellation date, March 14. The permit denial, March 18. The investor pullout, March 22. The lawyer filing from my mother, March 9. A timeline, a pattern. They weren't accidents, they were moves, chess pieces being positioned. And I was the queen being taken off the board. I took 2 weeks off from the office, told Michael I needed to handle family stuff. He accepted it without question because he thought I was a good person dealing with a stroke. I wasn't grieving, I was being reborn. The version of me that had been hurt and confused and trying to understand her mother's betrayal. That version of me died quietly in my house on a Tuesday morning while I was drinking coffee and looking at my grandfather's medical records. What replaced her was something else. Something cold. Something patient. Something with a very specific plan. The first thing I did was call my grandfather directly. I didn't ask about his stroke. I asked if he was willing to meet with me, alone, without my mother knowing. He said yes immediately. I drove to Seattle the next day. My mother was at her yoga class, 11 a.m. to noon, every Tuesday and Thursday, a routine as solid as the ground. I had exactly 1 hour. Grandpa was in his study. The curtains were drawn, but he was upright in his chair, reading the Wall Street Journal. He looked fine, a little tired in the way that 68-year-olds look tired, but fine. "Tell me about the stroke," I said. "There wasn't one. Your speech seemed a little slurred when I first saw you. Your mother asked me to seem affected. She said it would make my medical decisions more credible, something about power of attorney." I felt something shift inside my chest, not anger, colder than anger. "She lied to me." "She's been lying to everyone for 6 months, Grandpa said. He set down the newspaper. "I think I've finally figured out what she wants." "Tell me." "My will. She wants control of my estate, my business holdings. She found a lawyer, a very aggressive one, who says there might be a way to have me declared incompetent. If I were declared incompetent, my assets would go into a conservatorship. Your mother would be the natural choice to administer it." "That's insane. You're completely competent." "Yes, but she's been working with a doctor, someone her financial advisor knows, someone willing to testify about my cognitive decline." The fake stroke was supposed to be evidence. I sat down, the room tilted slightly. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I wasn't sure what to do. And because your mother is still my daughter, and I kept hoping she'd realize how destructive this was going to be." "How much money are we talking about?" "About $4.2 million. My liquid assets, my real estate portfolio, my shares in Chen Properties, and there's this house." $4.2 million. That was the number. That was what my mother's betrayal was worth. I stayed with him for 40 minutes. I asked questions. I took mental notes. He told me about the financial advisor, a man named Richard Carver, who'd inserted himself into their lives 8 months ago through my mother's yoga instructor. Carver had been feeding her financial advice that required her to access Grandpa's information. He'd introduced her to Patricia Solverson. He'd recommended specialists who could evaluate Grandpa's mental fitness. It was a coordinated attack, sophisticated, professional, the kind of thing that would work on most people. But not on me. Not on someone who'd been taught to see the future in broken things. My mother's car pulled into the driveway at 12:15. I heard it from where I was standing in the hallway, heard her key in the lock. I was supposed to not be there. I was supposed to be in Portland, managing a collapsing business. I was supposed to be panicked and confused and uncertain. Instead, I walked into the living room and smiled at her like nothing had changed. "Hi, Mom," I said. "I came back early. Grandpa wanted to see me." Something flickered across her face. Fear, maybe, but she covered it quickly with a mother's concerned expression. "Is everything okay? Is the business?" "Everything's fine. I just wanted to check on Grandpa, make sure he's recovering well." She watched me. I watched her watching me. "He seems to be doing much better," she said carefully. "He seems to be doing great," I agreed. Almost like there was never anything wrong with him in the first place. She didn't respond, but her hands went tight. "I'm going to stay for a few more days," I said. "Keep everyone company." That night, I went to my old room in the house, and I didn't cry. I didn't feel angry or hurt or betrayed. Those emotions were for people who didn't understand what was happening. What I felt was clarity. My mother had made a very specific mistake. She'd assumed I was just like her, that I cared about looking right instead of being right, that I would crumble when my business started failing. that I would fold my hand and let her win. She'd never understood me. She'd never wanted to. But that was going to be her downfall. I opened my laptop and started building a file. I wrote down everything Grandpa had told me. I documented the dates. I listed the names: Richard Carver, Patricia Solverson, the doctor she'd recruited, every piece of information that could be useful. And then I started thinking about how to destroy this plan so completely that it could never be rebuilt. Not with anger, with strategy. With the same logic that Grandpa had taught me to apply to broken buildings and failing businesses. I was going to see the future in this disaster. And I was going to take control of it. I spent the next 72 hours in Seattle without my mother knowing anything was wrong. I played the concerned granddaughter. I brought Grandpa breakfast. I helped him with physical therapy exercises that weren't actually necessary. I made casual conversation at dinner about the business and my life and nothing important. My mother gradually relaxed. She stopped watching me so carefully. By Friday, she was back to her normal routine: yoga, lunch with friends, phone calls about dinner parties. She thought I believed the lie about the stroke. She thought I was still in Portland dealing with a collapsing company. She thought she was winning. On Saturday morning, while my mother was at brunch, I did what I should have done the moment I understood what was happening. I called my grandfather's lawyer. Robert Finch met me at a coffee shop in downtown Seattle. He was 71 years old and had the appearance of someone who'd spent his entire life quietly observing how people destroyed themselves. "I need you to do something illegal," I told him. He set down his coffee carefully. "I'm going to need more information." I told him everything: the fake stroke, the conservatorship plan, the financial advisor and the corrupt doctor and the aggressive lawyer, the timing of the credit line cancellation and the permit denial, the way my mother had orchestrated a simultaneous assault on both my grandfather's autonomy and my business stability. "I can't do anything illegal," Robert said, "but I can do a lot of things that are extremely legal and extremely effective." "Like what?" "Like documenting your grandfather's current mental fitness, ironclad, medical evaluation from a legitimate neurologist, psychological assessment, video deposition of him discussing complex financial decisions in real time. That would make any competing claim of incompetence look ridiculous." "How fast?" "Monday, maybe Tuesday." "Do it." "I'll also need to alert your grandfather's financial advisor that there are questions about the integrity of his accounts. That will trigger an audit. If this Richard Carver is doing anything improper, and I suspect he is, an audit will expose it." "Do that too." Robert leaned back in his chair. "Sarah, I want to be clear about something. Once we start this, it's going to be ugly. Your mother is going to realize you know. She's going to panic. She's going to probably do something desperate." "I'm counting on it," I said. The other thing I did that Saturday was something I'd learned from Grandpa years before. Something he'd taught me when I was young and didn't yet understand how useful paranoia could be. I recorded a conversation. My mother came home at 2 p.m. I was in the kitchen making tea when she walked in, still in her yoga outfit, still flushed from exercise and whatever endorphins she'd managed to generate. I had my phone on the counter, set to record. Washington is a two-party consent state, which means I needed her permission to record her. But she was about to give it to me. "Mom, can we talk about Grandpa?" She set down her phone immediately. Her entire body language shifted to concerned mother. "Of course, honey. What about him?" "I'm worried about him. He seems so fragile, and I'm wondering if we should be making decisions about his care, medical decisions, financial decisions. I'm just scared we're going to make a mistake." She sat down. She took my hand. "Sweetie, that's why I've been trying to take control of things, to protect him, to make sure that decisions are made by someone who loves him. Has his doctor said anything about his competency, about whether he should be making his own decisions?" She paused, just a moment too long. "His doctor has expressed some concerns about his memory. his ability to process complex information. "Which doctor?" I asked. "Dr. Marcus. He's a neurologist." "Does he treat Grandpa's stroke recovery?" "Not exactly. He's more of a specialist. Your mother's financial advisor recommended him." I smiled gently, like this was all making sense, like I was being reassured. "I think I should probably have my own evaluation done," I said, "just to be safe, so we have multiple opinions." Something flickered across her face again, but she covered it with maternal concern. "Of course, that's smart. I'm also a little worried about the credit line issue with my company. I was wondering if maybe someone was trying to destabilize my business, and I didn't know if that could have been a strategy to pressure me, to make me more willing to go along with decisions about Grandpa's estate." The room went quiet. "Why would you think that?" she asked. "I don't know, it just seems like a lot of coincidences. The stroke, the business problems, all at the same time." "Sarah, I would never do anything to hurt your business. That's your livelihood." "I know," I said. "I'm just being paranoid, sorry." I stopped recording. I had her on tape, suggesting that her financial advisor was involved in Grandpa's care. I had her admitting knowledge of a doctor's evaluation. I had her implying that she'd been working with specialists on his behalf. It wasn't an admission of guilt, but it was enough to establish a pattern. That night, I called Michael. "I need you to do something for me," I said. "Anything." "I need you to get a detailed breakdown of every transaction on our accounts for the last 6 months, every credit line request, every communication with the bank, every interaction with the mayor's office about the Belltown permit." "Why?" "Because I think someone's been accessing our information. I think someone's been making moves against us from the inside." "Oh my God," Michael said. "Sarah, I don't think that's—" "Just do it, please." He did, and what he found was worse than I'd expected. Someone had requested copies of our account information, multiple times, using passwords that were almost but not quite our official ones. Someone had called the bank pretending to be me, trying to access our wire transfer protocols. Someone had called the mayor's office and said there were structural concerns with the Belltown development. Someone had accessed the investor's contact information through a vulnerability in our email system. All of it had happened over a 6-week period, starting March 9. The day my mother had listed herself as my grandfather's business advisor. "Who would have access to all of this?" Michael asked. I thought about it. Who had access to our passwords? Who knew our security protocols? Who'd been with me long enough to understand how our business operated? "Check with the password manager," I said. "See if there's a way to tell if anyone else logged in." There was. Someone had logged in using the backup password, the one we kept in the safe in the office, the safe that Michael's ex-girlfriend had helped me move to the new office space 8 months ago. Michael's ex-girlfriend, whose brother worked in commercial real estate finance, whose brother might have a very good reason to want to sabotage a competitor, or whose ex-boyfriend, actually, might have been trying to hurt the woman who'd fired him after he showed up to work drunk 3 times in 1 month. I didn't want to believe it, but belief wasn't relevant. Evidence was relevant. I called Robert Finch back. "I need you to help me with something else," I said. "Something that's going to require law enforcement." The twist isn't that my mother was trying to steal Grandpa's money. That's bad, but it's obvious. It makes sense in the way that human nature makes sense. Greed, paranoia, desperation, these are normal motivations. The twist is that she wasn't working alone. It took Robert Finch and a private investigator named Douglas Chen, no relation, exactly 4 days to piece together the full conspiracy. Richard Carver, the financial advisor, had been working a scheme for 3 years. He'd identify wealthy elderly people through his yoga instructor connections. He'd insert himself into their lives slowly. He'd build relationships with their family members. And then he'd orchestrate a coordinated attack designed to gain control of their assets. It had worked 4 times before my grandfather. 4 people, all over 70, all with significant assets and families that didn't talk to each other. 3 of them had lost control of their estates. One had actually died under circumstances that were technically natural but deeply questionable. Patricia Solverson, the lawyer, had been filing the same paperwork for years: petitions for incompetency hearings, conservatorship requests, all of them with fake medical documentation. The doctor, Dr. Marcus, had been providing false evaluations since 2018. And my mother was one of 12 family members who'd been recruited to the scheme. The difference was that my mother was smarter than the others. She'd been more aggressive. She hadn't just tried to steal Grandpa's money quietly. She'd simultaneously sabotaged my business, probably as insurance. Probably with the idea that once I was desperate and broke, I'd sign over my share of Chen properties to her without question. It was a brilliant plan. It was also felonious. But here's where it gets worse. Michael, my partner, my friend, the person I'd built my entire company with, had actually helped them. Not deliberately, not as part of the conspiracy, but he'd been manipulated into it. That ex-girlfriend's brother had been hired by Carver to access our systems. When the brother hit a wall, couldn't get the passwords he needed, couldn't navigate our security, he'd reached out to Michael. According to the investigators' findings, Michael had told him no, multiple times. But he'd also mentioned that there might be vulnerabilities in how we handled certain security protocols. He'd mentioned that the office safe, which we'd recently relocated, was in a less secure location than before. He'd mentioned these things in a conversation that the brother had recorded. Out of context, the conversation looked like Michael was helping. Out of context, Michael looked like he was part of the conspiracy. I called Michael the day before I planned to go to the police. "I need to ask you something," I said. "Of course." "Did you ever talk to Derek Romano about our office security?" There was a very long silence. "Yes," Michael said quietly, "but I wasn't trying to." "I know you weren't, but it's going to look like you were, and I need you to be prepared for that." I told him what I'd found, about the recording, about how his words could be interpreted, about how the police were going to have questions. "Sarah, I didn't do anything wrong." "I know, but we're going to need a lawyer, and we're going to need to be very honest about everything." The police came on a Monday morning. They arrested Richard Carver at his office in a medical building in Bellevue. They arrested Patricia Solverson at her law firm. They arrested Dr. Marcus at his clinic. They arrested Derek Romano and 2 other men who'd been working the same scheme in different states. They questioned my mother. They questioned Michael. They questioned Grandpa. In the end, my mother was charged with conspiracy, fraud, and attempted financial exploitation of an elderly person. Patricia Solverson and Dr. Marcus and Richard Carver faced federal charges. Derek Romano faced charges related to computer fraud. Michael wasn't charged with anything, but his reputation took a hit. For a while, people assumed he'd been part of the scheme. It took 6 months for the investigation to conclusively prove he'd been unaware of what his casual comments had enabled. That was almost harder than the direct attack, watching him suffer for something he hadn't done. Watching him struggle to trust himself. But it was also the moment I realized I was capable of something I'd never wanted to be: ruthless. Because I knew I could have prevented his suffering. I could have stayed silent. I could have just gone after my mother and Carver and protected Michael's reputation. Instead, I'd let the investigation follow the evidence wherever it led. Because truth matters more than friendship. And justice requires that we don't protect the people we love if they're in the way of it. Even accidentally. The sentencing hearing happened on a Thursday in King County Superior Court. I sat in the 3rd row, directly behind the prosecution table. My grandfather sat next to me. My brother was in Portland. We hadn't talked about this yet. We hadn't really talked about anything since the investigation started. My mother's lawyer had suggested a plea deal: 15 years with possibility of parole in 10. My mother had refused. She'd insisted on a trial. She'd been convinced that a jury would see her side of things, that they'd understand that she'd been desperate, that Grandpa had let her down somehow, and she'd been justified in trying to take what she believed she deserved. The jury deliberated for 7 hours. They found her guilty on all counts. When the judge asked her if she had anything to say before sentencing, she looked at me. Directly at me. "You did this," she said. "You turned everyone against me. You always thought you were so smart, so much better than everyone else. This is your fault." "Your Honor," the judge said sharply. "It's all her," my mother continued. "She's ruined this family." I didn't move. I didn't show anything on my face. I'd learned to be very good at that in the last 3 months. The judge sentenced her to 16 years, with possibility of parole in 13. Patricia Solverson got 18 years. Richard Carver got 22. The doctor and the other conspirators got between 12 and 15 years each. When the gavel came down, it was very quiet in the courtroom, like the decision was final in a way that went beyond legal conviction, like something had shifted in the fundamental structure of the world and now everyone could feel it. My grandfather stood up. He walked out of the courtroom without saying anything. I followed him. In the hallway, he stopped at the windows overlooking the city. Seattle was gray and green and complicated the way it always was. "I'm sorry," he said. "For what?" "For not seeing it sooner, for letting your mother get as close as she did, for the fact that you had to fight this battle alone." "I wasn't alone. I had you." "You had to use your intelligence against your mother. That's not fair. That's not how it should be." I didn't have a response to that, because he was right. It shouldn't be how it is, but it is for some people, for some families. "What happens now?" Grandpa asked. "Now we rebuild," I said. The business recovered faster than I expected. Once the story came public, and it did, splashed across the Seattle Times and picked up by national legal blogs, clients started calling. People who'd been hesitant about working with us suddenly wanted to work with us. Apparently, surviving a coordinated financial attack and still remaining in business is compelling evidence of competence. I rehired 2 employees we'd had to let go during the worst weeks. I increased salaries across the board. I established a formal partnership agreement with Michael that made his stake in the company non-negotiable and spelled out exactly what would happen to his shares if I died. The Belltown development went forward. Different investor, different timeline, but the project broke ground in October. 60 units of mixed-income housing that's now worth more than the original estimate. Michael eventually regained his reputation. It took longer than the business recovery, but human memory is a strange thing. People stopped thinking about the recording. They started thinking about the fact that he'd still shown up to work every day even when people suspected him of being a criminal. They started respecting that. Grandpa started traveling. He took a trip to Japan. He bought a property in Boise that he thinks is undervalued. He's probably right. He still comes to the office 3 days a week, and he still looks at projects the way he's always looked at them, like he's seeing into a future that other people can't quite imagine. He's 84 years old now. The doctors say his stroke recovery is quote-unquote miraculous, which is funny because there wasn't a stroke. But miraculous things are just things that happen for reasons people don't immediately understand. My mother's appeal was denied last year. She's in the federal penitentiary for women in Alderson, West Virginia. She has a job in the library. According to the prison bulletin board that I checked once and then never checked again, she's a model inmate. She doesn't have many visitors. Richard Carver died in prison 18 months into his sentence. Pneumonia. He was 63 years old. Patricia Solverson is still incarcerated. Last I heard, she's teaching paralegal classes to other inmates, which seems somehow fitting. Dr. Marcus got out on parole after 8 years. He moved to Idaho and works as a consultant for insurance companies. He sends my grandfather Christmas cards, which is either a sign of remorse or a sign that he's completely incapable of understanding what he did. I don't think about them much anymore. What I think about is the moment in my kitchen when my mother said, "I would never do anything to hurt your business." I think about how confidently she said it. I think about how completely she believed it. Because that's the thing about people who justify their own behavior. They're never lying to you. They're lying to themselves. They've constructed such an elaborate mythology of their own victimhood that they can't see the moment when victim becomes perpetrator. When I was 22, my grandfather taught me how to see the future in broken things. What he didn't teach me, what I had to learn on my own, was how to see the truth in people who desperately don't want to be seen. My mother wanted me to be like her. She wanted me to crumble when pressure was applied. She wanted me to panic and make mistakes and eventually give her control because it seemed easier than fighting. She didn't understand that I was never going to be like her. I was built by someone else. I was built by a man who looked at a falling-apart strip mall and saw $6 million in the future. I was built to see what other people couldn't. And once you learn to see the world that way, you can never go back to being blind. Chen Properties is worth $43 million now. I own 52% of it. My grandfather owns 38%. Michael owns 10%. And that's exactly how it should be. The thing that people always ask is whether I forgive her. I don't think forgiveness is the right word. Forgiveness suggests that there was harm done and then a choice to release the anger. But I released the anger years ago. I had to. Anger is a luxury for people whose enemies are still a threat. My mother isn't a threat anymore. She's a person who made a series of choices that escalated across months until she'd built something that couldn't be stopped. And then I stopped it. Not through luck, not through kindness, not through mercy. I stopped it because I understood the system better than she did. I understood how power actually works, and she only understood how power is supposed to work in fantasy. That's the thing they don't tell you about revenge. It's not a feeling. It's not a moment of triumph or satisfaction. It's just the process of being smarter and stronger and more patient than the people trying to hurt you. It's just the slow, careful work of seeing the future and making sure you're on the right side of it. Everything else, the court case, the conviction, the sentencing, that's just paperwork confirming what you already know. You won because you were always going to win. The rest was just time.